Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Who is the next character who is actually going to die in Boruto? Now, in my personal opinion, I think this right here could be a bunch of names. At first, obviously, I'm going to talk about Naruto and Sasuke and their possibility of dying. The topic of Naruto and Sasuke dying has been talked about to nauseam, so of course I'm going to kind of speak to this as of right now, but I definitely do have to point out there are definitely some differences between now, when we did actually talk about Sasuke and Naruto dying, and before, when we did actually talk about Naruto and Sasuke dying. I think one of the biggest ones has to be Sasuke. At this particular point, a lot of people do believe that it's a very good possibility that Sasuke is going to eventually die, and of course people talk about, hey, Boruto has on Sasuke's clothes in the time skip in part 2 when he was fighting against Kawaki. I personally don't necessarily look too much into that, but as of right now, what we do have to bring up is, of course, Sarada kind of needs an upgrade, and one of the biggest ways to potentially give Sarada a Mangekyo Sharingan would definitely be to kill off a character like Sasuke. And not only that, by the way, I've always said flat out point blank, I don't necessarily think that Sasuke is going to die, but if I were to make a case for it, Sasuke as of right now is one of the most disposable, high skill assets. Sasuke is extremely strong, but also doesn't necessarily provide insane utility as of right now. He doesn't have time space and jutsu, doesn't really have the Rinnegan, isn't really the Hokage. So story wise and plot wise, you kind of understand why Sasuke would potentially be a very big disposable asset. But the reason why I don't necessarily think that Sasuke would actually die as right now is because I think that he has to go through a time skip with Boruto. I think that he's probably going to end up training with Boruto, and not only that, if Sasuke were to actually die, it needs to be a huge buildup, and as of right now, I don't really see that buildup for Sasuke. If Sasuke were to die like Neji, there would be a huge uproar, and I don't necessarily think that right there is going to happen. Naruto, on the other hand, very different scenario. First things first, Ida and Damon are headed to the Hidden Leaf Village. If you guys don't necessarily know, I'm pretty sure most of you guys do know, Ida and Damon, they're cyborgs from a different place. They're not from the Hidden Leaf Village, and now they're coming back to the Hidden Leaf Village, and because they are the quote-unquote strongest characters right now, Damon for sure, I'm not completely sure about Ida, but because they are so strong, I think that Naruto's probably going to have a big influence in them once they actually do get to the Hidden Leaf Village, and I think that Naruto's probably going to have a long-term relationship with one of those cyborgs, and it's going to be Damon. Damon, as of right now, as I just said, is probably the strongest character in Boruto, and Damon is extremely impressionable. And what we do understand about Naruto is that he is the king of talk no jutsu. If there's anybody who could actually get Damon on the side of the Hidden Leaf Village, it would probably be a character like Naruto. He did a very similar thing with the character like Kawaki. As of right now, Kawaki absolutely loves Naruto and pretty much lives for Naruto. In my personal opinion, it wouldn't necessarily be that same thing with Damon, but I wouldn't be too surprised if Naruto would have 50% of that impact on a character like Damon, and of course get him to be loyal to the Hidden Leaf Village. I think that Naruto has way too much utility as of right now to actually die. Shikamaru, on the other hand, this is a character, in my personal opinion, who probably has the most possibility to actually die. And this right here is not necessarily because I don't necessarily like Shikamaru. I'm pretty sure everybody here can agree that Shikamaru is a very good character, but Shikamaru is one of those characters who isn't necessarily extremely strong, who of course has a lot of goodwill in the Boruto and Naruto fan base, but of course is similar to Sasuke, where he's like kind of dispensable. And Shikamaru, in my personal opinion, is even more dispensable than Sasuke, mainly because Shikamaru isn't necessarily at the strength level of a character like Sasuke. Shikamaru also had a build-up already, if you guys don't necessarily recall, very early on in the Boruto series. Matter of fact, 80% throughout the Boruto series, Shikamaru has been completely ghost. But in the most recent arc, the Code arc, Shikamaru had a very pronounced role in that particular arc. And hypothetically, if Shikamaru were to actually die, even the people who don't necessarily have that big of a connection with Shikamaru would still feel that impact of Shikamaru actually dying, mainly because he had such a big impact in the last arc. Shikamaru, in my personal opinion, he is in a prime position to actually die. Now, in my personal opinion, will he actually die? I'm going to say I hope not. I'm going to say I hope not, but if I were to give a prediction as of right now, I'd probably say no. The reason why I'd say no is because I think that Shikamaru could possibly be a valuable asset in the future, mainly because he was so hands-on with the motto, he was so hands-on with the Otsutsuki clan, he was so hands-on with Code, and I personally believe that we're probably going to get to see a lot more of that in part 2 of Boruto. I definitely don't expect for a lot of this to be over pre-time skip. So because of that, Shikamaru does actually have some utility going forward. But again, most likely to die, I'd probably bank it on Shikamaru. And of course, just adds to the overall story. Naruto in turn would probably get a bit colder, Shikadai would get colder, and actual impact on the series, it wouldn't necessarily be that huge, mainly because Shikamaru isn't really the Hokage. Shikamaru doesn't necessarily have to train other people. Don't get me wrong, Shikamaru is a very good character, but as far as utility, it's not necessarily that potent as a character like a Naruto or a Sasuke. Even though I still do believe that Sasuke is a bit dispensable, Sasuke is still strong, so we need strong characters like that. Shikamaru is a little bit different. Now, not only that, Amato, in my personal opinion, is probably going to be one of the more dispensable villains. And I don't necessarily think that people even consider him as a villain as of right now. He's more of like an old man, but he's definitely the most dispensable quote-unquote villain. I think that Code, as of right now, he's in his character development stage. I think that the Boruto writers want to build his character and eventually have him be one of the best villains in Boruto history. That's just me. Now, not only that, Damon and Edith, they're just being introduced into the series, and I think that their arc is now starting. So of course they're not dispensable. So as far as villains go, Amato might be the most dispensable one, and not only that, his quote-unquote off button that he has on Kawaki. Now, of course, it's not necessarily an off button. There's nothing that he can actually press to get Kawaki to completely shut down. But one of the things that we did see with Delta, Amato had an off button also in Delta as well, which means that if he does something, the person or the cyborg completely shuts down. That happened to Delta. Now, in the last chapter, he essentially said that he had a very similar thing with Kawaki. He says that if he says a phrase, Kawaki will shut down. Now, we understand that that right there is definitely a very big threat to one of the main characters in the Boruto series, and if we want to eliminate that threat to one of the main characters in the Boruto series, one of the best ways to potentially do that is, of course, to kill off Amato. I think this right here is probably a no-brainer, to be honest. Another big reason for Amato potentially dying has to be Amato has actually been training a character called Sumire. Sumire is definitely a character that I could see getting a lot more screen time in the series, but the reason why it's definitely important in this particular case with Amato is because Amato is training her. Eventually, if Sumire gets the ability to actually make cyborgs, make synthetic dojutsus, and of course upgrade actual human beings, that right there would be absolutely huge. It would essentially mean that there is no use for Amato. Amato would essentially be a liability in the Hidden Leaf Village because Sumire would essentially be a lot more loyal than a character like Amato. Naruto knows a lot more about Sumire than he does about Amato, and of course, because of that, if Amato actually does die, it wouldn't necessarily mean the end for scientific technology development because we have Sumire. And not only that, Amato is also a very interesting character. If Amato actually does die, people would actually feel it, man, because he has been at the core of the Kata organization, the core of the Code arc, the core of essentially everything, giving us a bunch of information. And I personally do feel like a lot of people would actually feel his death. Now, once Amato does actually give us damn near all the information that he actually does know, I think that Amato might actually be dispensable. And what I mean by information, I'm talking about the lore to the actual plot. I'm talking about how strong characters are potentially if we do want to take his word for it. And not only that, of course, the information about scientific technology, him essentially giving that to Sumire. I think once he dispels all the information that he does have, I think that right there would probably be when he actually does die eventually. I don't necessarily think that anybody here believes that Amato's probably going to stay alive throughout the entirety of Boruto. And if that's the case, I think that if Amato were to actually die, it'd probably be, I'd give it right before the time skip. That right there would probably be like one of the best times for me, mainly because I think that at that particular time, I really wish that Sumire would take a step forward. Now, this right here is more of like a selfish thing for me, mainly because we do understand that Sumire is probably one of the characters that could probably get Boruto to actually use his Jogan, and because I absolutely love the Jogan, I want Sumire to have a bigger role. The only reason why I say that is because we do understand that Sumire's summoning jutsu, the new way, is what caused Boruto to activate his Jogan the first time. That plus the negative energy, of course. But if there is a possibility of Sumire getting a bigger role into the Boruto series, of course the possibility of Boruto unlocking his Jogan in the Boruto manga is that much more pronounced. But I definitely do want to know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Which characters do you guys think is probably going to be the most likely to actually die in the series of Boruto? But it's me, your boy Barbie, and we out.
It's a knife.